which is where the theme for tonight's event comes in the series. So taking the theme conversation and exchange, talking with children, this evening's speakers will each present their recent projects that have entailed working with children and young people, either in the development and formation of a specific project or as its intended audience. The title of talking refers to a reciprocity that each of the projects this evening entails. So a learning and sharing of knowledge that comes with the importance of listening, I think, in any conversation. Considering a younger audience further signals an interest in working with the wider community surrounding a gallery or institution, and embedding programs within the locality to encourage diverse audiences and a long-term engagement with a given space. So our first speaker this evening, Marianne McKee, is Head of Exhibitions here at Blue Coat, and will talk more about the gallery's programme, in particular the summer exhibition Abacus, and their interest in continuing to work with children and other individuals within the community. Tonight's theme also reflects, in part, the recent strand of programming at Blue Coat that has seen a series of exhibitions explore alternative approaches to education, artist works made in collaboration with children, as well as the history of the building as a school, which the current show in the Peaceful Dome is depicting. The following presentation by Mick Marsden and Julian Wood discusses the project 50 Things to Do. 50 Things to Do is a workbook given to all pupils starting in reception at Wyburn Community Primary School in Sheffield. Accompanying them throughout their 5 years of early education, the book playfully encourages pupils to undertake a series of activities, from the everyday to the adventurous. So children are asked to document tasks that are focused upon an active learning, encouraging exploration, curiosity, and confidence. The design of the book involves a careful consideration of how to communicate to younger children, so the formats and fonts that are easiest to read, as well as devising imagery that signals the processes and tasks asked of them. A question over communication further resonates when considering the wider community and different needs associated with, for example, literacy levels or English as a second language. Our fourth speaker, Heather Jones, is exhibition manager at Kunsthal Stavanger in Norway. Kunsthal Stavanger welcomes a broad and diverse audience, and as such the team have established an art library and a programme specifically for children, in addition to their regularly scheduled exhibitions. Heather will talk about their children's programme and Stavanger's approach to facilitating artist projects that have a young audience, both co-producers and collaborators. Finally, Polly Brannan, an artist and educator based in Liverpool, will discuss her ongoing project Avant Gardening, her previous projects as part of Public Works, and her current role as education curator at Liverpool Biennial. So each speaker will talk in turn, and I will introduce them all briefly before they do so, and then there'll be an opportunity for discussion and questions at the end of the evening. But before I introduce Marianne, I'd like to thank everyone who's made today's event, as well as the whole series of talks possible. So the team at the Blue Coat, Raina and James at This Is Tomorrow, and the generous support of Arts Council England, Contemporary Visual Art Network Northwest, Yorkshire and Humberside Visual Arts Network, North East Contemporary Visual Arts Network, and the participating venues of Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art, the Northern Gallery of Contemporary Art, Blue Coat, Grundy Art Gallery, the Tetley, and the Whitworth. So, Marianne McQuay, sorry I said McKee earlier, is Head of Programme at Blue Coat. She curates across interlinking visual art, literature, music, and performance programmes, and is responsible for the Blue Coat's artist studios. In addition, Marianne oversees Blue Coat's open access print studio, which is run by Liverpool Biennial associate artist Fran Disley, and she's a visiting lecturer on fine art and curating programmes at Manchester Metropolitan University, Liverpool John Moores University, and Goldsmiths, University of London.
Hi everyone, thanks so much, Laura. So I'll make a start. This is not me, but my smaller version, who had the opportunity to sort of like beta test Abacus, which is the show I'm going to talk about tonight. Some of you probably know Blue Coat really well, others of you maybe not so well. It's a building which is really easy to kind of spend time in and dwell. It's got a garden, it's got spaces you can just sort of hang out in, but it doesn't have at the moment a dedicated kind of family or education room that's publicly accessible. And Abacus was a way of, without sort of moving walls or changing architecture, testing something out to see if we did do those things, whether that would work. The impetus to do a show for children was partly triggered by the 300th anniversary of the building last year in 2017. And as Laura said, this has been a school and then it became an art centre in the 20th century. It was a school at the time when even the idea of childhood didn't really exist, or kind of rights of a child, and it was a kind of refuge but not a kind of place of creativity. And that's what we actually wanted to celebrate this summer, as well as kind of charter history. So we were thinking more with Abacus about the ways that art galleries and art centres have kind of stepped in as a place for creative learning, for play, that we don't separate our lives like we used to. So we don't say this is an exhibition that I will go to as an adult and then this is your time as a child. But it also felt quite timely as the artists are starting to address children kind of more directly, and there were other projects around at the time. So in the run-up to this, I visited the Baltic, the Playground project, which had come over from Kunsthaus Zurich. There was the Brutalist Playground project that Assemble did. Biennial were working on their Children's Commission for 2016. So there was a lot kind of happening at this time, with artists having certain kind of shared reference points. The show had a mix of artists from the city, the wider north, UK and internationally. It was a show of work that was designed, sort of, it's an exhibition, and the work was either commissioned for children, so it was new, or kind of redesignated for children. So it already existed, but the artist was happy that this was its kind of primary function. It wasn't a show that was collaboratively produced with children. That is something that happens here all the time. So we have artist educators who are artists working with children. We have a group of adults who lined up, it is called Blue Room, who are adults working with children. That's a really innovative programme that's 10 years this year. And then we have visiting artists collaborating to make work, and also within our studios. So it's something we do, but this was more of a show in anticipation of children or addressing them. And as a city centre, art centre, we know we have this kind of footfall and audience, and it was the first time, rather than thinking that we would add something onto a show, the whole gallery, which is a kind of big Brutalist wing, would be for children. I haven't curated a show for children before. And one way that I started to think about how to deal with the spaces was to designate each space a function. So the way the architecture was done 10 years ago in the wing, our gallery is a series of rooms, and each room sort of has been, I think the architect kind of suggested the kind of work that might be in it. So there's a small room without much natural light that naturally suits video. There's a beautiful window room that kind of addresses the street. Sometimes we go with this architectural determination, sometimes we subvert it. But there's another way to think about these rooms and to think about them having a purpose, and that was something I sort of kind of made me feel at ease about the show, that if you gave the room a purpose, then there was a chance that you took away some of the barriers or the uncertainties about what to do in a gallery, because you had a space for watching, a space for play, a space for drawing, and a space for reading and making. And Mark Simmons, a Liverpool-based graphic designer, did the vinyl, which was based on tiny, tiny little stickers he'd collected, kind of things you might have seen in the 80s, and he kind of blew them up. So we had a slightly different style to the very austere kind of white cube that we usually have. The space for watching was video art for kids, and we effectively borrowed a project from Kunsthaus Stavanger, which Heather will reference, where the films are a pre-existing video art, but everything is potentially appealing to children. And I was contacting the artists, and William Wegman was very happy to lend his dog videos. So everything kind of existed, but we sort of addressed it in a slightly different way. So it was more brightly lit than a kind of video room you might have for a different kind of show. Francis Didsley, an artist in Liverpool, did a curtain that was an artwork, but also a curtain. And it was the first room, and it was also quite a calm room, because you wanted to have kind of different dynamics running through the show. The second space, our largest gallery, we gave over to Merseyside-based artist Emily Speed. She's really interested in her practice in architecture, in kind of fake architecture, in postmodern architecture, in how architecture psychologically affects us, and in how we affect buildings. And I knew that she had had a commission to design a playground that hadn't happened, but had kind of researched the principles of play. So within her practice, sorry, I'll stop hitting the mic a minute. Within her practice, she's always looking at architecture in relation to the environment and to its users. So we decided to take some of the kind of learning about play and playgrounds, a lot of which, as well as you could imagine, the kind of health and safety, is about sort of leaving spaces undetermined, and that was something we did with this space. She created a kind of series of mini architectures. One was based on Toxteth Chapel, which is down the road. One was based on a courtroom, which was always very popular with children. They had a series of beautiful costumes, but they were also quite kind of open-ended as an environment. The room for drawing, which is our window gallery, was Simon and Tom Bloor, and they were the artists when I came to work here. I thought I will have to do something with them. They are often working in relationship to 20th century kind of art and design. So sometimes that's public art, sometimes it's architecture, and they're really, really interested in some of the kind of unrealized sort of artist-educator projects that happened. This is how the room started off, this is how it went, and this is how it went. And I think it was quite an interesting experience to have, obviously we knew this would happen, to have a work kind of evolve over the series of a show, and to know that you had to allow it to kind of go on its own journey. They based this piece, which has had a version in the Whitechapel, on some of the work of Kurt Rowland. And he was an artist educator who was active in the sort of 60s and 70s, and he believed that children were capable of understanding and appreciating visual culture. These were handbooks for teachers, so they weren't kind of art books, they were practical kind of books. And they've taken some of his designs, but they also were interested in some of his theories that like destruction is a creative act, some of the things that we've kind of maybe eroded out of architecture. So the piece is intended to unfold as it unfolds, and the kind of destruction of the chalk which they cast is in itself an act that then makes the piece kind of collaboratively. They're also really interested in 60s play sculptures, and these are actually probably a little bit earlier, post-war play structures that Birmingham City Council, where they're based, commissioned an artist to make. So around the time that everyone's putting Henry Moore's and Barbara Hepworth's or versions of that, artists were also being commissioned to do play sculptures, and the kind of influence of the sort of 50s, 60s and 70s was quite strong on the show, not in the sense that failed modernism looks beautiful, because there is a sense it is quite seductive, but they were really interested in when local authorities were invested enough to be able to commission artists to do things for children, in what the thinking was behind kind of play sculptures and structures. And so the show had quite a lot of reference material in it, so things that were very immediate for children, but also some degree of information on these kind of experiments kind of in education. The last room upstairs became the room for reading and making, and that had quite a lot of reference material in. Polly was in this room, who's in the show. Everything was designed. Some of the artists, this is a wallpaper in the background done by Kevin Hunt, and we asked some of the artists to provide decor for the show as well. So some things were interactive and some things were decor. This is a really lovely feature. our participation programme worked with a project called Out of the Blue, which is a kids club that's run since 2014. And they responded to the Kurt Rowland Shapes and different groups of these kids that do this after school kids club, created designs, and then we picked 3 of them for the windows, and the windows became places for reading, but also it kind of made us think how austere galleries often are, and that they don't offer these kind of opportunities to dwell. So it was a really lovely feature we kind of want to keep going. The participation programme, who are always working away often in rooms behind the scenes as well as off-site, then had a room which did have some of its own challenges, but was also a room that could be used for workshops and activities. And they came up with a summer programme that was incredibly kind of creative, and we sort of put the room out of circulation when activities were on. This is Drag Queen Storytime. So lots and lots of things happened. There was toddler voguing for Liverpool Pride, and anyone who sat in a room singing The Wheels on the Bus, in a library over and over again. What was really great was like the humour and the pleasure that also parents would get from this, but also trying out unusual things. Because the show didn't need interpreting in the sense that you weren't having to learn about who Epstein was. There was a bit more freedom to kind of do projects and try things out. So that's one of the kind of shots on the way. We did a lot of programming for adults as well. This is Laila Rashid, Joyce Efia-Hama, and Danielle Juando, and they came to respond to the fact that one of our participation programme, Betty, had put together a beautiful children's library that looked upstairs in that room. We've just seen that looked at kind of childhood in its broadest sense. So maybe you've got same-sex parents, maybe you don't live with both parents. Looking at kind of children's literature, not just what you're kind of picking up in Waterstones. And these writers came to talk about the lack of visibility for Black and ethnic minority writers within children's literature, but also run a workshop on it. And Lila runs a programme called Megaphone Rights. We're a mixed art form organisation, so sometimes Agabus was touching on this. And during the programme, I should say, we had a really exquisite dance performance inspired by a kind of childhood collaboration with Paula Hampson, who's re-performing this on the 3rd of Feb. So we looked at kind of movement and children and learning, literature, and then we were kind of going back over some of the histories. So we did do an event on, someone's signalling 2 minutes. We did do an event on Kurt Rowland, who actually kind of, unlike John Berger, became a bit of a forgotten figure of his time, but we were doing some of those kind of histories. It was a learning experience having a show that had to adapt to really kind of heavy use and daily use, and attracted fans in a sense that wanted to come back and do certain things. We had a very kind of robust sort of evaluation afterwards that also meant that we sat down with the invigilators who had kind of been through this experience. And there's lots and lots of learning we've kind of done from it, but I would say it was a really kind of joyful project. And one of the kind of best things about it, I guess, were the people who came back kind of over and over again because they felt there was something kind of for them, and at the same time it is actually contemporary art. There was a kind of connection to kind of real work. It is an ambition of ours to change the building over time. So again, as I mentioned, most of our family and education spaces behind the scenes. Our artist studios and print studios are behind the scenes, and we want to kind of shift this culture that divides making and production from viewing work. But in a way, this show became a kind of an experiment in seeing what might be possible. And I shall finish here. Thank you.
So our next speakers are Mick Marsden and Julian Wood. Julian has taught for 19 years across all primary year groups. He's nationally known for using technology in the classroom to create, inspire and provoke. And Julian co-created the Creative Partnerships in a Third Space project in 2008, which partnered teachers and artists. In 2010, he was awarded the Microsoft Innovative Educator Award for using QR codes to stimulate storytelling. But more recently, Julian worked with Mick Marsden at Dust Collective to develop 50 Things to Do. So Mick is an award-winning illustrator with a long list of clients of news organisations and international brands, and he's part of the design collective Dust. His personal work has been exhibited in galleries and public spaces throughout the UK and the USA. And in addition to his illustration career, Mick devotes his time to lecturing in the graphic arts at Leeds Beckett University and has been a visiting lecturer at a variety of institutions across the UK.
Hello, I'm Mick and this is Julian, just in case you didn't know.
Hi, and thank you very much for coming. So a little bit of background to the project. So I work at Wyburn Community Primary School, which is an inner city school in Sheffield. It's in the top 2% most deprived areas in Europe, but we do very well, thank you. We kind of take children who are very low in terms of academic achievement, and we call it the Wyburn journey by the time they leave us. It's in like the high 80s in terms of national expectations, so we do really, really well. We have a very different approach to education than most schools. I think it's very much towards experiential learning. We have children who don't have the opportunities that more middle-class kids would have, and so to kind of tip the balance their way, we do lots of different things that they wouldn't have an opportunity to do otherwise. Anyway, how did I meet Mick? So that's the more important thing, isn't it? So anyway, I don't know whether you know about Creative Partnerships, so unfortunately that has sailed down the river. But we did 4 projects. We've currently got a shed that was exhibited at the V&A, and that was one artist, and we did some poetry, and then we did some work with Dust, and that basically was based around the Reggio Emilia stuff, and it was called Third Space. Third Space is not school, not work, a third space where children and adults can learn. It's like the coffee shop stuff, at Starbucks. You go and plug into the Wi-Fi and you do some learning. It was a project about, it was done quite a while ago, 2009, and we used Twitter to report on the project. So if you're interested, at Third Space, all the tweets are still there, believe it or not, if you have a look. Anyway, basically that was all about putting teachers in the kind of like role as students. And that's the reason why it was Third Space. So we sent people on teachers on barges. We sent teachers to learn archery and put them into the role as kids so that they could understand what it's like to be a kid. Because I know we've all been kids, but when you're a teacher, sometimes you forget. Anyway, so we worked with Dust and we produced this, which is basically a documentation of the project. So half of it is a documentation, and then the other half is a kind of a do-it-yourself, if you wanted to do it yourself bit. So that was why we worked with Dust. And then we came up with, a few years later, we were looking at the 50 Things to Do Before You're 11 3/4, which I'm sure you're well aware of. It's a great idea, but really, really poorly executed in terms of what it looks like and what it's about. Fantastic idea. And we thought, okay, as a school, why can't we do our own 50 Things to Do that we would want every child to achieve by the end of their time in Wyburn? And so basically we wrote a list, and we wrote a list with our community. So we asked the kids, we asked the parents, we asked the teachers, what is it that you think you need to know about before you leave school? And that basically formed the 50 Things to Do list. And we kind of whittled it down, because it wasn't 50 things originally, it was like 985 things. And so, so it was an editorial process, obviously, because you know, there was a couple of things that the kids put in, like build a swimming pool in the school and things like that, which they always go for, don't they? First things, what do you want in the playground? Swimming pool, roller coaster. Yeah, anyway, so we rattled them down to 50 things. But we also, as a kind of a side project, we had a 20 things list as well, that because our school starts at 6 months, because we have a children's centre which we run, so we have a nursery, and it starts at 6 months, and we have all the way up to 11. And so we decided to do a 20 things list for preschool that parents can do. We're very much a community school. It's an open school. I'm the deputy head. I share an office with 3 assistant heads and a head teacher, and it's hot desk. So nobody's got a desk. It's an open door policy, and the way it works is that we kill them with kindness, because we get some very angry parents every now and again, and that's how it works. But anyway, so in terms of community, we wanted to kind of give back, and also to kind of give parents something to do if they stuck for stuff. So there's a few things on the list, like visit a museum, which they wouldn't normally do, and visit a castle and things like that. Anyway, we move on.
Julian, that top row.
Oh,
Go back to that.
top row.
Very threatening people, top row.
Yeah, I know, yeah. That's me in various poses. Anyway, we'll move on. But yeah, I know, yeah. Sorry about that. Very menacing.
I wanted to change that.
Yeah, that was the Dad's Bouncers reading project that we did. So anyway, the project. So basically, I knew that Dust were a fantastic collective of people, and I'd worked with them personally on this thing as well. And so basically, I approached Dust and said, look, we've got this, and so are you interested? Basically, and they're very, very good people, and they've got kind of like a do good project. So they saw us as a school, and we worked with us before, and anyway, so this is mixed bit.
Shall I take over?
Yeah, have you got that? Do you want to?
I'll come to this.
All right, is that on? Yeah. Okay.
Hi. So the project, as Laura pointed out, I'm an illustrator, and I've got quite a wide range of clients. And this was a part of a job I did for a charity called Artfelt at Sheffield Children's Hospital. And if you look up Artfelt and Children's Hospital online, you'll see what a fantastic job they did. And they worked with some brilliant people like Morag Myerscough to do the interiors. But they had this very awful kind of stairwell. And they said, Nick, can you provide something for this? And so I did 40 of these animal procession prints. And they start at the bottom with a blue whale and finish at the top with a mosquito. So it goes from light to heavy as you go down. That's a hidden thing. I like to play around with stuff like that as an idea. But it's transformed the place for the patients, which are children, and also the children's parents and the staff of the hospital. And you can also buy these, the prints. They printed out on G-Clay prints at 40 quid a pop. But
Where can you get them from, Mick? Just
online. This is the sales pitch.
Oh,
This is part of the this is part of the charity thing. So these things actually exist to actually create money for the charity. So if a kid says, "Oh, I like that picture of that elephant, mummy," and the kid have it, and half of the money goes back to the charity. So it just creates some revenue for them. So that's where the project I was working on at the time, when Julian came in with the 50 things thing, and I'm quite passionate about how people kind of design for kids, and I think sometimes they can be either, I think Julian's pointed out, middle class, you get bears in pinnies, mummy bear in pinny, or it becomes kind of scrolly and scratchy, and I think there's a difference between childlike and childish. So I think kids like daft stuff. So we started looking at this kind of approach, and then we realised that it had to suit a wide variety of age groups, from 11 to 16.
no.
No, sorry,
Other way around. Yeah.
Other way around, yeah.
From 6.
from 6 to 11. Sorry, 6 to 11. Can you cut that on that camera, please? So, 6 to 11. So when you're 6, you like different things to when you're 11. So you have to really kind of design in between. So not for 8 years old, but obviously in between that space. So we thought about, it's interesting, the reference he used earlier in the, was it Kurt
Roland.
Kurt Rowland, yeah. And I think I actually struck a bit of a chord and thought I have to look that up. But this was the ideas we had. We are making things simple, but not childish. So this would appeal across the board. And it's developed in this kind of way. It's very graphic and an almost 1960s approach to the work. And this kind of developed on, and this is the end product where...
Yeah, I was going to say, because I mean, basically it went to and fro, and obviously I've got an educational perspective, and I've got a kind of very unique talent because I can put myself in the role as a child, believe it or not. It's really difficult. I'm probably the most childish person anybody's going to be meeting, even though I'm like 47. Anyway, but it was, you know, it was like a to and fro in. So this is the front cover, and can you see the pencil before? There was no lines, and it looked like a cigarette. And I said to Mick, it looks like somebody's holding a cigarette. So that is the kind of, you know, I didn't want that to be on the front cover, but now it very much looks like a pencil, and that's the kind of like, you know, detail that we looked at.
So you're looking at something which would last
Yeah.
a child from 6 to 11. And so this thing had to be quite robust, and also something they could cherish and take through the school and not think that's a bit shit and throw it in a bin. And I think you've had quite a good upkeep of them, haven't
Yes.
you? And so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think there've been one or two lost, but in general they do love them, and they've got a little bag they can carry it around in and things like that. So, and I think the important thing, which I'll over to Gillian in a minute, is it's become kind of part of the curriculum of the school. Do you want to...
Yeah, and so basically we have something called Schools Out Day, where the whole school goes out, and we pick one of the 50 things to do to tick off. But in actual fact, well, I'll show you what we'll do, because I'll show you one of the ones that the children have used. But we came up with an idea. Well, it wasn't actually me, was it? It was gosh, I can't remember her name.
Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia came up with an idea that we had a stamper. So we've got a stamper that looks like the Facebook thumb. So every time they do something, in actual fact, yeah, we'll have to go past that one. Yeah, that's it. So there, it's a little circle. You'll see it, and I'll show you when I've got some scans of the actual thing, which I thought again was a really good idea, because I thought it would be really good to collect kind of items, and kids love collections, and to get it stamped. It's also a really good thing. But also the other thing is that it's kind of like a scrapbook, and so it's like an ongoing piece of work. And so kids have stuck things in, and they've taken it home, they've took photographs, and we've got kids who have got a separate book, so they've got a separate scrapbook because they don't want to harm this fantastic book. I mean, the other thing is it's made of really, really high quality paper. In terms of the front cover is this cardboard that's waterproof, which is really expensive. But we wanted to keep that design, the element in terms of quality high, to give it a kind of a raw, you know, to give it some meaning in terms of the value of it. So much so that people have asked to get it reprinted, and they kind of balk at the price a little bit, but we hold out and say, yeah, we could produce a kind of a really cheap looking version, but we keep it like this.
And just this is the
Yeah.
20 things. This was a process for younger.
Yeah.
Children,
I mean,
wasn't it?
yeah, I mean, and also this is really interesting. I mean, I you know, not as a oh, 2 minutes, okay, that's fine. So basically, the story of this is that we didn't have enough money to make another book, and so Mick had done this fantastic project where you pulled it out, and so literally, and that was a very cheap version. So it was money orientated. So you'll see if you have a look, that you can stick it to the poster. On both sides, and so that is your 20 things. So it's you know, we give this to preschool kids, but again, it's really, really child friendly. So much so, in actual fact, that you know, we looked at a font that was specific for children who were dyslexic because of the A's, you know, the what they called the dodgy A's that don't look like A's, and so you know, children can't read that. Also the colouring as well, so children find it very difficult to read black print on white background. So we looked at it in those sort of things. But this is one of the ones that a child has used. So you can see it like as a thumb stamp. You can't really see it there, but and again they visited the Peak District, and so they've taken a photograph of the Peak District. This is about musical instruments. and it says learn to play a musical instrument. And again, the element here, so there was little bits. Mick, do you want to talk about, did you know stuff? Because there was stuff in there.
That was another, the person I was working with, Georgie Burns, who was the intern at the time. She actually had a good, we try and use some of my old students at Dust, and we give them kind of a lot of space to work in the business as well. So we allowed, with Gillian obviously, we allowed her to kind of have a say in this, and she was thinking it'd be nice to have little facts and things like that. And if we go back to the previous one, we had things where people could interact with them. So we designed a flag, so you could, I mean, when I was a kid, there's nothing like better than drawing a flag on that castle. I mean, and so you could put your musical notes in there. So there was a bit of interaction with it. There's one about tying shoelaces, where the laces were missing, so you could actually draw the laces yourself and all that kind of stuff. So.
And also, if you notice the orientation, and I very much wanted the book not to be used like a traditional book. I very much wanted them to look at it and orient the book in certain ways, so you can see, so that a lot of the texts are in different ways. That's us done, isn't it?
Yes.
That was very good, that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mick.
So next we have Heather Jones, and Heather Jones has joined us this evening from Stavanger in Norway, where she's exhibitions manager at Kunsthal Stavanger. She's also co-founder and editor of the online arts journal Contemporary Art Stavanger. She was previously exhibitions coordinator at Independent Curators International in New York, and a master apprentice at the studio of Solar Wit, and studio manager for the artist Swoon.
Can everyone hear me, or do I have to? Is this okay? Yes? Good? Okay. So as Laura mentioned, I work at Kunsthal Stavanger, which is in Norway. Usually when I'm asked to speak about the Kunsthal, especially internationally, outside of Norway, it's about some of our bigger international solo or group exhibitions. So it's a pleasure to get to talk about our kids programming. It's something obviously that's much closer to home, and I think rarely gets the attention that it deserves. So thank you for the invitation, Laura and Bluecoat, to present our programming. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and talk about the Kunsthal for a second. I think I'm the only person not from the UK. So those of you who are unfamiliar with the Kunsthal, we are located in Stavanger, Norway. We are a contemporary art institution that focuses on the production, exhibition, and distribution of contemporary art that's part of a large international discourse. That said, That said, we are located geographically on the periphery, on the southwest coast of Norway, and so we strive to create a balance between that sense of regionalism and our international program. And we do that through a series of collaborations with artists, with guest curators, with institutions, but of course also with more local programming, such as events, tours, and that includes our programming for kids. I should mention that we are a fairly new institution, and so since the inception of the Kunsthal in 2013, under the new direction of Hanna Mugas, including young minds in our programming has been central to our mission. We've always wanted to create a new generation of artists and a new generation of art audiences. Stavanger has been experiencing, I guess, a kind of renaissance in the cultural arts, especially in the visual arts, for the past 5-ish years due to several factors that I don't have time to get into right now. But unfortunately, like many, many other places in the world, despite this kind of cultural renaissance, funding for arts education in the school systems has been steadily declining. And so although we can't fill that gap ourselves, we're trying to, in some small way, contribute to arts education in our institution. I know you mentioned that the institutions are now kind of stepping in as a place for creativity and learning through creativity. Well, that's dwindling in the public school system anyway. So we only have 15 minutes, and I think I used 5, basically. So I'm just going to give, rather than focusing on any one specific project, though I could, I'm just going to give a brief outline of a few of the ways that we incorporate programming for children in all of our activities at the Kunsthal. So the first is, and I will flip slides eventually, but the first is Kunstklubben which is Norwegian for our art club for kids. It's one of the most obvious public forward-facing programs that we do. So basically kids who are 6 to 16 can sign up for this program. It's open to all, but they do have to sign up. And they meet once a month for workshops with professional artists. So all of the workshops are taught by practicing professional artists. And they have a workshop, and it usually focuses on some kind of specific concept or media process, etc. And so we do have what might be the more expected topics like photography or textile art or portraiture or landscape painting. But I'm very proud to say that the artists that we work with don't shy away from more difficult topics. So we've had workshops on performance art with the International Duo Findi Sandsmark. We've had an incredible workshop on feminist art during our pretty provocative show with Judith Bernstein. We've had sound art with Morten Norby Halvorsen. And so, and that's just to name only a few. So it's always, let me just show you a few pictures. This is some of our, we did like outdoor and installation art. We've done drawing and portraiture. We've done street art with spray paint, which was interesting. And a lot of the workshops, or actually most of the workshops, are in some way based on the exhibitions that we have on view at the time. This is a workshop with a local artist named Inge Brun, who similarly created sculptures for playgrounds that our director Hanna stumbled across and thought were amazing. So we did a huge retrospective of her work with a lot of workshops for children. So they were able to see the artwork and then make their own work fairly self-directed. You know, they were just given materials and said, create a work inspired by what you've seen today, in short. And of course, they will eventually take these home with them. Here's photography. And so it's really fascinating to see how easily the children take in concepts that I would at first consider to be challenging. They take them in and they play with them. After 30 odd years in the arts, or in my life, I've developed like a embarrassingly rigid structure in my mind of like what is conceptually easy and what is conceptually difficult. But for some of our 6-year-olds and our 7-year-olds, landscape painting and provocative feminist art is kind of the same level in their minds, and it's really fascinating. So I often think that the artists and the administrators working with these workshops for children often learn more from the children than we teach the children. And that's really trite, I know, but it's also very true. So that's where a lot of the exchange takes place. So I should back up and say that I'm actually not an arts educator. We work with arts educators. I'm a curator and the exhibitions manager, and in that sense I have a lot of interaction with these programs. But we do have an amazing team of educators that we work with. So where I have come in, actually I added note to self, someone else mentioned that in working with kids, you also work with their parents, right? That's unavoidable. And so although we didn't start out with this like sneaky way to get to the parents, the truth of the matter is because of our programming for children, we've been able to build relationships with the parents, and we've been able to expand our community to people that might not normally come to our exhibitions on their own. We've now given them a reason to come through our big heavy wooden doors, and now they realize that that's a space for everyone. And that happened because of their children, right? Not because of their own initiative to see our artwork. So we also, as part of this art club for kids, at the end of each season, so we have one in the spring, one in the fall, we have a workshop with a curator. Because it's equally as important to us that they learn not just how to make art, but how to present art, what that means, and the various ways that you can think about what to show and how to show it. So at the end of the season, they have a workshop with a curator. They talk about showing art and what that means. And then together with the curator, they organize a show of the work that they've made during that season. It's great fun. It's complete with advertising, which is what's happening right here. They're making their own posters for the show. There are speeches. There's a public opening. And these exhibitions take place in our galleries, not in the hallway, not in the kids' workshop in the basement. They take over our main galleries, sometimes more than one, and we have a public opening. And it's amazing to see how proud they are You know, they have a lot of fun seeing the work that they've made in the past, but also to show it off publicly to people. And it's not just their parents that come. It is overwhelmingly their parents, but there are a lot of other people, local people in the community that come as well. And again, it's surprising to see how experimental and how challenging their ideas about artwork, but also about the exhibition of artwork. So, how am I on time? Yeah. Okay, pressure. I have to tell this story. So 2 years ago, we work with curators in our institution, but also guest curators for the kids exhibition. And so this year, 2 years ago, I was the curator having this workshop. And it's so embarrassing. I was so arrogant, and I was talking about, you know, how we hang artwork, and, you know, 58 inches is standard, 147 centimeters, standard hanging height. And they were asking me, like, well, why are pictures always hung up here? And I was like, well, that's, you know, your average, like, line of sight. And almost all of them, when they understood this, they were like, that's not fair. That's not my line of sight. And you know, there was an uproar, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've never really thought about this before. And I'm doing a kids exhibition, and then this 6-year-old kid yells out, and what about giants? Right? Totally valid thing to think about. So we sat down together, thought about it, talked about it, and organized part of the show like this on 2 sides of our large, like, elongated gallery. So this is an exhibition design that we came up together that anyone can view artwork at a comfortable height, on a comfortable line of sight. And it was really challenging for me, who thought, you know, I'm gonna teach these kids how to show art, you know? And so it was a really, really wonderful exchange, and I got a lot out of it. Okay, moving on very quickly. So that's kind of one wing, one arm of our kids programming, is the Art Club for Kids and the exhibition. Here's some pictures of our openings. So, okay, Art Club for Kids. As previously mentioned, we have curated, along with all of our regularly scheduled exhibitions, an art video for kids. And this is not a kids video, this is a video artwork that we think children might like to engage with on some level. We have a designated screen in our foyer that's permanently installed next to a play area that screens a video or a series of videos during the exhibition. Our exhibitions change about every 2.5 to 3 months. And the videos change along with them. So we've had videos with William Wegman, obviously, with David Shrigley, with Yuri Kujimiya, Reese Corinne, John Baldessari, and all of these videos are, no, that's not true. Almost all of these videos are on our screening room, on our kids' website. I say some, not all, because of, you know, screening rights and things like that, boring stuff. So our goal is to have as many videos as possible available in perpetuity on the screening room of our website. Additionally, we have additional educational information, so artist profiles, interviews when we can, information about the videos, additional videos, etc. So this leads me to, so that's Art Club for Kids, that's Kids' website, and now the third arm, 3 arms? Sure. The third arm of our kids programming is the kids' website. So this is where we are. A couple of years ago, we launched a kids version of our website. So you go to our main website, you click on kids, and what you get is basically a replica of our website, but it's specifically for kids. So it does have the screening room, but it has its own blog, its own with information that's relevant specifically to kids. It has its own event pages where parents and kids can go to see the events that are relevant for children. And my personal favorite, there is a Color in the Kunsthal page. So you go to the website, you click Color in the Kunsthal on that button, and you're led to this page where you can do exactly that. I have wasted hours. It's very satisfying. I highly suggest you all do it. It's the most fun you'll have all day. And so you color in the Kunsthal, you click Save, and then your masterpiece is added to this rotating gallery at the top of the kids page. So kids can go back and like click through and find the one or multiple ones that they've made. I'm serious. You got to do it. So I want to stop for a second because it seems like a small thing to have a kids website. You know, it wasn't a huge amount of effort on our part. But I think it's really important because we're saying kids are important, and we're saying that they are central to our institution, and that we try to show, we try to make that true. So, we give them an exhibition in our main galleries. We give them their own section on our website. The kids belong in our institution, and that includes online. So another thing, okay, time. Another thing that we do is, along with all of our regularly scheduled exhibitions, we work with local schools, particularly in our neighborhood, to do tours with the school groups, workshops with the teachers, etc. So we have, sometimes we've done 5 in a day, which was a heavy day, but several times a week we have school groups coming in. But in addition, we have like weekend family days, open workshops for kids that they don't have to sign up beforehand. And children come, again, they usually do a tour, they learn about the work, and they are inspired by the work, and they're able to make work based on what they've seen and take it home with them. So we've done workshops with Maren Huss, which was incredible. We've done flip books, we've done textile art, we've done workshops with Torbjörn Rødland, with Nicholas Party, and this spring I'm really, really excited. We are doing a series of workshops with the iconic German toy designer Renate Müller. Along with an exhibition of hers, we're going to have a completely interactive playroom. So half exhibition, half playroom. So in the 30 seconds that I have left, I've basically drawn with very, very broad strokes some of the ways that we include children in our programming. But there's one other thing that's a little bit harder to point your finger at, but that I want to try to point out, and that is that in everything we do, we try to be welcoming to children and families. So yes, we have programming for kids, but we also have a play area. We have tables and chairs where they can sit and have snacks and eat with their families. We have high chairs. We have a changing an area where you can change diapers. We have a ramp up our very steep steps for strollers, because we realized no matter how much we say we're a place for kids, if we don't have the practical details in place, it's just hot air. So in all ways, we try and welcome the boundless energy and curiosity of kids into our exhibitions. We do, of course, have things that shouldn't be played. We show artwork that shouldn't be played with or sneezed on, but we also do show artwork that can be played with and sneezed on. So, I don't know that we have achieved the perfect balance yet, but it's something that's always on our minds and something that we're trying to think about. So, if you're interested in the Kunsthal, which I hope you are, and in our programming and in our kids' programming specifically, I'm obviously here after the talk to chat, and this is our website. You should check it out, and I'm really serious about the coloring page. So do it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so our final speaker is Polly Brannan. Polly is an artist and educator who's produced projects at Frieze Art Fair, Lisbon Experimenta Festival, and Nottingham Contemporary, amongst many others. She was collaborations curator at Studio Voltaire from 2006 to 2009, and education curator at Serpentine Gallery from 2011 to 13. She's co-founder of the network Avant Gardening and was a member of the collective Public Works, and she is currently the education curator at Liverpool Biennial.
Talking of giants, I have giant notes, which are a bit embarrassing, but never mind. Okay, so hi everybody. Thanks to Laura, the Blue Coat, for having me. So I'm an artist and a curator based in Liverpool, and I've always been inspired by a lot of methodologies around learning through play. And I've always been inspired by anything to do with kind of collaborative processes and ways of working. And I work with all sorts of people, not just children. So I never, until I took this job, really kind of think of them as a different audience. They're just a different people to talk to. And a lot of the work that I do historically has had a lot of links to kind of ownership and use of public space. So I worked on a lot of very early regeneration programs with through the Labour Party and different initiatives like this. But today I wanted to talk about these kind of histories of learning through play and these methodologies and how they've kind of inspired my own practice artistically and curatorially. So So this is one of the first images that really struck me when I've been doing this kind of ongoing thing for the last 10 years of collecting archive material and different types of playgrounds and play. And this image is one of the earliest images that is recorded of one of the first junk playgrounds after the Second World War. And this picture to me is, I mean, it's just amazing, but it's such a powerful image to me of something of such like displacement to complete kind of ownership within like a second of taking those bricks and rebuilding their own histories or their own cities themselves. And it's just something that's always inspired me in the way that I try and work. And a lot of these, you know, came to London by this amazing woman called Lady Allen, and you can see her on YouTube talking like this, and she's amazing. She uses, you know, it's a few words out of sync with contemporary language, but she's amazing. And these sort of images led me to kind of lots of research around artist collectives, a lot from the sort of 70s and 80s. Sea Red Women's Collective, who I got to work with, who were quite complicated to work with, but nevertheless they were amazing. And these sort of roles of artists in the wider society was something that was really inspiring, that actually what happened to a lot of these women that did these incredible collectives, and as we all know, collectives often have a certain lifespan. They're not meant to go on forever because it's that kind of moment of people working together. And actually I found out a lot of them became a lot of the leaders and working, a bit like Marianne was saying, with artists designing play sculptures, and a lot of the adventure playgrounds were actually made by artists. So this idea of artists and community sort of working together to rebuild and take ownership of our cities and places we live is super inspiring to me. So I'm kind of going to whiz through a bit like some of my own projects and then end with some of the stuff at the Biennial because it all links together. So I was in a collective for a long time called Public Works, who are an artist and architect collective, all the members from all over the world, but we were based in London. And this is one of the longest projects. I did many projects with them, but this is the one that I started with them. And I was kind of in residence on this estate in Kilburn for about 5 years. And it started off as one of the early regeneration projects. So instead of the proposal that we put forward was instead of deciding what this community would want through a huge change in where they were living, the idea was to, rather than have like, you know, nothing wrong with the mural, of course, but like instead of that at the end, what is the process that these people go through? So actually this cube kind of changed shapes, and all that became real research of what that area needed. And this always struck me as how these kids just, you know, they were like basically took on the role of bodyguard of this work and took ownership of it. And this way of working with people to design their own things is a total inspiration from the other slides that I've shown you. I then sort of worked with Public Works for a long time, but then was getting a bit stressed out by the government was starting to try and fine people for like not recycling and not this, and I didn't really understand what I needed to recycle and what I didn't, and I didn't know how to grow my own food. So me and a guy called Paul Green started this thing called Avant Gardening to try and understand ideas of how the environment affects our behaviour. And it's not, again, not just with children, but a lot of these projects, these kids have got nothing to do really on these estates. These are all in Woolwich, in London, and that actually they just end up hanging out there all the time and looking after it, and then you get to know one of their dads who, you know, who then sort of takes authorship of it and doesn't get it sort of smashed up or vandalised or whatever. So this idea, again, to me, this idea of play and experimentation was always through different ways of communicating with people, whether it's like an architectural feature that changes or a mobile garden. In a way, it doesn't matter what they are. They're just a moment in which you can communicate with people and understand what we can do to work together to make something or do something. Another example I wanted to show, because it's, we're talking about children, but I thought children and young people. So this is an ongoing, well, not ongoing now actually, so that's a lie. I did a residency for a long time as an artist on the Edgware Road, which was part of the Serpentine Gallery programme, which still exists. And one aspect was it that I made a proposal to work with, I knew that because I'd worked there in and out of, because it's mental working there and people would sort of leave all the time, so I would step in. And I knew that lots of young people were asking to do work experience. As we all know, there's always people that want to do work experience. So I decided to make a proposal to work with these young people as their work experience to make a project together that was sort of, you know, attached to sort of real life experience, etc. And this area in London is just off the Edgware Road, which is that's halfway, right? Yeah. Which is just off the Edgware Road, and basically it's almost central London, around the back of Marble Arch. It's one of these streets that's one of the last living streets in London that's got like affordable housing, social housing, care homes, schools, but it's an area that does want to be regenerated for, you know, there's a huge value there. And it's a complicated process. So actually, like many of these things, as we know, aren't always done properly in terms of consultation. So we decided to work with these young people, and they called themselves Moi, Makers of the Impossible. And they actually made their own proposals about that area and what they wanted. And this became real research and tested ideas that then became, you know, on the Friday morning in small print, if anyone wants to join the local authority to think about plans, you know, we all stepped in with all their ideas. And actually from that, they actually did get funding to create their own film nights and do different things. But I mean, it was also quite depressing to sort of try and teach them that actually there's a reason that maybe the flats that they live in, the things aren't working, or these, you know, they're being pushed out. So it was an educational experience for them in many ways, but they took on ownership and took it forward and made these kind of publications where their proposals were shared with other people. And I think that was a really successful project, and it brought together with other communities that we were working with. But they were a super powerful group at that time. It was amazing. So, just moving on in my life, I came to Liverpool biennial. I'd worked with the current director, Sally Tallent, before, on and off at Serpentine Gallery. And although I'd worked with other galleries before, to me this was an opportunity to work in a very different way, and the biennial being changed completely from every 2 years to have a year-round programme. And that the invitation that Sally knew I was an artist was, you know, I love doing the festival and I love working with amazing international artists, but the year-round programme was a real opportunity, I felt, for me to push some of my methodologies and thinking around learning through play on a larger scale. And at this point in my life, and I think I'm going the other way again now, but was how in a more powerful position can we influence policy and curriculum and different things that were going on. And it's a different conversation, a different approach, but it was an interesting one to have. And this is a project which I'm sure lots of you know, Chilwell Academy. A lot of the kids are actually from Toxteth that sort of get bussed out there. And this was this idea of creating this Dazzle playground, which they actually worked out where it was going to go. All the symbols of play were designed through bespoke tools that we made with Hatto, the design collective. And so all the games that they made were their own, and, you know, all these things run round, you get points to do this. And it was a really sweet project because it was about working with the younger kids that were coming up to that school. So on their first day when they get there, they had the game. I mean, lots of kids sort of running around with like missing shoes and didn't know where their lockers were and crying and stuff, but it was very sweet. And through these, you know, these opportunities, that one I sort of took on myself for working with them with the Slice Partnership Programme. And this one in Everton Park, I'm sure lots of people that live here know that Everton is a challenging place because of its history and being let down, you know, again and again and again. And to me, it's an area that has suffered huge kind of displacement of people. I mean, the park in itself is like a political park where things have been pulled down, you put it on top and you don't really know what to do with it. It had no lighting, no toilets. And this was an opportunity that we piggybacked on with the Friends of Everton Park, and we've been working there for 7 years doing smaller projects, but actually ended up doing this permanent artwork, which again, we invited Koo Young A, who's never worked in a participatory way, she's never worked with children. I mean, she doesn't even really speak. It's like a completely different way for her to work, but actually, you know, she's kind of like a poet. She's super switched on, so why shouldn't she have the opportunity to work with young people? And actually this then became, all the designs were worked out with skaters across Liverpool and young people from Everton who aren't skaters now because they don't have those facilities, but maybe they will be in the future. This is one of the most complicated projects I've ever worked on, but it took about 2.5 years, but it was amazing that it happened in the end, thanks to all those people. And just because I'm probably running out of time, like vomiting it all up, but in 2016, with the biennial, I'm sure lots of you saw it, and those who didn't, we were really inspired by, you all have to write this down if you're interested in education children. Kochi Biennale in South India is amazing. They have a program called ABC, Art by Children, which is just like genius title. And my director had gone to see it, and they had this like solo show of a kid's work, and there was no, you know, it was no like, oh, this is a children's bit. It was just a solo show by a kid. And she brought this idea back, and we were really inspired by it. And because of the way that we are at our stage now, hopefully in the UK, we didn't want to call it a children's biennial. We didn't want it to be separate to the other biennial. And we had these episodes and narratives throughout the biennial. So we called this the Children's Biennial, and within this we had commissions. So again, I worked with Childwell, because it's only me in education, although we're an integrated programme, it's just me. So I often work with schools on long-term projects rather than millions of schools, because I just can't, unfortunately. And with this one, again, they did all the bespoke tools to design things. It was all this kind of inspired by NASA from 1977, when people went out to space and didn't know if aliens were there and would try and use codes to have conversations. And so they have things like, you know, is Beyonce still there? But also like, how are you feeling? What are the citizens today? So actually this bus, you may or may not have seen it, but it's actually, you know, a kind of a permanent artwork in the city now. It's for 3 years. And you can cipher the codes if you take a ride on the bus. And it's, you know, I think it's the number 80 something, I can't remember, but it actually goes to the school as well, which is great. And through these programs, it's really about inviting artists, a different type of invitation that maybe haven't worked with children before. And I think that's something I'd never really thought about. It was quite a challenge, but I know with my own skills that I've been doing as an artist that I can breach some of those kind of relationships. It's not always easy, but you get such a different response to how people might work with children and young people. And as part of this work, I always do kind of interpretation and more formal programs. And with this, a bit similar, not as good actually, because it's a very small version, but I did ask them, you know, children, what would you say for other kids to come to Liverpool would do, you know, and I was thinking, oh. And then my favourite one was go to Asda for the free food samples. That's like my top one. I do that already, so that's fine. But these kids, you know, basically ciphering this like crazy, perhaps overcomplicated conceptual framework, they were like, no, we get it. And, you know, and we worked with them, with the illustrators to make the symbols, make the story and the characters. So everything I do is I try and incorporate it into this kind of user-led way. And like I was saying at the beginning, my opportunity at the Biennial, which is something I'm still trying to do, as we've touched on, is that, you know, art and creative subjects are being ripped out of our curriculum. And in my position that I'm in here, you know, I can influence it to a certain point because it's a local authority decision. And so I try, well, I always do actually, turn these projects and different artist projects of hours and hours, and Elizabeth here has helped me with this massive task of actually trying to make cross-curriculum activities based on art. So you can look at a project and look at geography, look at maths, and I try not to do it to the extent that they say, well, why do we need art then? But to actually say that, you know, these art projects and these contemporary practices are integral into the way that children understand and learn about the world. And I was going to go into Marvin Gaye Chetwynd, but I just don't have time, but that was amazing, and you should watch it, it's great. Which is a massive project we did with children last year, which is a whole other conversation. But I'll just end with 2018, because actually we're working with Ryan Gander, and we're doing a big project with a school, Notty Ash Primary, which starts on Monday. And the work will be presented here at the at the Blue Coat, and there'll be permanent public artwork and again resources. So hopefully we'll be doing some programming together, which will be great because we haven't had the opportunity to do that before. So, okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I thought to myself, should I just let her do it? Couldn't.
Say.
Really been alright, but she did a big thing in the room.
Okay, so thank you all very much. I suppose I feel like there's loads of echoes across all of your presentations. And one of them being like the centrality and the importance of play, and play as a way of learning as well as a way of creating works. But something I was kind of wanted to ask, or maybe as a way to get the discussion going, would be so this idea of exchange, and you've talked about, Heather, you talked about kind of really incorporating children into the Kunsthalle. But how, I suppose I'm quite interested in how that affects your main programming, because there's still a distinction between the two, and the same with the biennial. But how has your experiences of those children projects, has it informed like the continuation of some of the works, or how you sort of work with artists more generally?
Me? Okay. Yes is the answer. Yes, it has influenced us. No, but I think it's harder to like point your finger at exactly how. It's not like now I'm always going to hang everything lower or something, but just I think it's in general just the curiosity and the questioning of everything all the time. So now I mean, so the example that I gave with like the what if there are giants, right? There generally aren't giants, but now I do think all the time with so we're hanging an exhibition right now actually that opens next week, and so we're constantly talking about like how should we hang this. Like we don't have to do it in the standard way that we learned. Like we can play, we can hang something really high, hang something really low, see what works. And then we also think a lot. I'm going to think of something really smart after I hand over the microphone, but one of the things that we do is we also think a lot about incorporating play into all of our exhibitions, so like having something that kids can do when they come, but also playing with our exhibitions. Like what do they look like? What are we showing? How can we, despite our best efforts, Hanna and I talk a lot about how what we do can feel really rigid. It can feel really serious, and it can feel really boring. And so how can we play? Like how can we be in our 30s and 40s and remember like why this is fun and why we should be curious and why we should be asking questions. So I don't know if I can, and 50s. Well, I'm not there yet. God willing, I will be. But yeah, so I guess I can't point at it, exactly like it's influenced me directly in in this physical way, but I think just in our mentality and how we think about things. And of course, I mean all but one of us who work at the Kunsthalle have young children as well. And so that's kind of constantly on our minds too, like, what will my daughter think of this when she comes to see it? Like, will she want to come? Will she want to engage with what we're showing? If not, why? What can we add to our exhibitions, or at least our, art video for kids or our workshops to engage like all levels of our audiences? Anyone else? Yeah.
I guess it is a bit. It is a bit different at the biennial because I'm part of the programming team, which is a huge difference from anywhere else I've ever worked. So I'm part of the curatorial, I don't just put forward artists that work with kids, I put forward painters and sculptors, all these different things. So my expertise is in that, and I think a biennial is different to like a museum or gallery because we can change every 2 years. We don't have a building, and that's something that we do suffer with in terms of like having a dusty building where there's nowhere to change a nappy, or and but it means that like we were inspired to work with children, and I feel a responsibility because of the school system, which before I didn't really engage with that because it was taken care of, and it's not anymore. And I'm like a little bit bitter that I have to do that. I don't want to not do it. I enjoy doing that work, but it's a responsibility that's bigger than maybe the biennial to continue that practice. But I think what's interesting is working with other members of my team who never thought about working that way, or were disinterested perhaps, didn't realise they were didn't take so much interest in that type of work. And I think, when they see an artist who has never worked with children before, like Marvin Gaye Chetwynd, it's like, oh, okay, well, we're taking this a bit more seriously and we're going to have fun with this, and the way we present that. And that was like one of our most ambitious projects that my director put the biggest budget behind, really. So in terms of ambition, I can reach it. And I think because I've learned so many things now, that's why we're working with Ryan. That was a very specific invitation to work with children this year. So I think once you've done something okay, you might as well keep going with it and then add something else, because you can't start again, if you know what I mean.
Can I add something? I would just, Heather, it was really interesting what you said, because a lot of the time as in education, you get a lot of people who say, oh yeah, we ask children all the time, but in actual fact they do ask them, but they take absolutely no notice of them at all. And children are fantastic provocators. They are really, really amazing, and they often provoke in the right way if you just listen. And it was really interesting to hear how you change your mindset because of the fact that and you'd never seen it before. And the other thing I was going to say was that I don't think that play should be limited to children. Yeah. So when you're looking at doing the exhibition and you're thinking, well, play, we can put some pens out for the kids to draw. Why don't you think wider and think, okay, what can we do that the children and the adults can do in play? Because that's the beauty of play. And there's in Chatsworth House, there's an adventure playground, and on the walls of Chatsworth House, there's this really famous saying, which is, you're never too old to play, but you might get old if you don't. And I think I live by that, and yeah.
Can I say something, Tori? Okay, I teach slightly older children from the age of 18 up to 70 at Leeds Beckett, and they struggle with the idea of play. My graphic design students will not play. Now I'm just wondering, and I might put out to the rest of you and all in the audience, that is there something missing in education previously, which was previously there, which isn't there now anymore, because they seem to think that illustration, painting, making work is actually a serious work business, and that, but all the adults I know who do it are playful. I mean, I'm very playful with it. I mean, I'm more happy. Never happy if I've got some felt tips and a piece of paper, I'm like a pig in shit. It's like I'd like nothing better. But the students won't do it. They seem to think that's a bit childish. They don't realise that they make really interesting work by playing. And wondering whether education has kind of stopped this idea that education can be fun, and making it all kind of maybe work-based, like moving towards the world of work rather than to the world of play.
Sorry, were you going to?
I just was going to say, I guess, in relation to where we're located and the way that developer-led regeneration tends to edit out play. So developer-led regeneration wants you to live in flats or shop, but it doesn't really put in the other kind of civic functions. So in a way, having a building with a garden and some land around it, I think doing Abacus made me think about the thresholds of play, really, and that giving over the gallery was sort of one step, but the next step would be to think about the whole kind of building and the kind of civic function, essentially, that you have, and that changes as the city kind of changes around you. So
this is just in response to you. So I'm from the US, I work in Norway, but I don't know if you've noticed, I'm not Norwegian. So coming from the US school system at least, I'm not sure exactly how it is here, but this idea of why don't 16-year-olds play, or why don't 18-year-olds play? I wonder if it has something to do with this idea of meritocracy and that we can't waste any time, right? And play is, if you're coming at it from a certain angle, is a time waster because you can't be guaranteed of your outcome, right? And so to play, you have to be willing to like knock it all down at the end and start over, and that's the point, right? That's also a huge waste of time, and it doesn't help you on standardized tests, and it doesn't help you meet the deadline so that your client is happy, and all of these things that we now order our lives by as adults, which is starting in your teenage years. So I think, and it's the same with us. You asked like how this affects our exhibitions. It's like, well, we've started giving, so this is a concrete example, I guess. We've started to try to give ourselves longer installation periods so we can play around with how things look, right? Because we have a deadline. We have to open a show and we're going to have a bunch of people there. And we have to have a show and it can't look terrible, which means sometimes we can't like play and see how it looks and change things around and like play with ideas and then say it's a terrible one and let's change it again. So, I don't know if that's an answer, but that's something that just popped into my head when you were talking about that.
It's an answer of sorts. I don't necessarily agree with the fact that this thing has to be monetised. I mean, it's about making space.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, I know what you say. I'm not saying you're not. I think we should make space within work to play. As a creative in an office of creative people, the part of the playing bit's the good bit. The rolling it out is the boring bit, but that's the monetised bit. But the rolling out bit doesn't happen without the play bit. So I think there's more emphasis needs to be placed on actually having fun with stuff in the first instance.
Are people familiar with the concept of a hack day? Right? So this in the tech industry, which I'm not in, but my partner is a computer software engineer, and so at his company they would have hack days, which is a day where you don't do your work and you do something fun. You code a fun project, you create a program. It has nothing to do with, a deliverable or a job that has to be done by a certain time. It's just like, hey, have fun, learn something you haven't done before, experiment, play. And I think maybe that's something that other industries could learn from.
Can I just say, Polly, do you feel that in inviting artists to work with children who've never worked with children before, in a way you're inviting them to play, like you're inviting them to experience a bit more freedom or experiment around their practice?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, 100%. And it's a nice position to be in when you look at an artist's practice. And, for example, with Marvin Gaye Chetwynd, she is a born collaborator. She's like a puppeteer of people. She's a director. She does everything herself. She does, she directs, she makes, she films. I mean, she did it all with her kid on her back for most of the project filming with one hand. But, looking at her, she is super playful, but she's super serious and she knows exactly what she wants. And so when inviting with kids in, it was a nice position to be in, to look at her practice and think, well, she is an obvious person that should work with children. And she'd done a small project, but not that, a couple of workshops kind of thing. And I knew her from Studio Voltaire from a long time ago, and she was, she might not remember this, but she was like, oh, I'm not interested in education. I'm not, it wasn't, people weren't, I always felt like this sort of overgrown nanny at like a cool party, and I was never on the invite list because I was like, education. And she was never interested in that. And, we talked a bit about it, but actually it was maybe that time of her career and a different point that she was thinking, but it was clear to me that she would be absolutely brilliant to work with children. And that was complete, play. And a lot of artists, like Ryan, he works with his kid, Olive, and that's a really nice collaboration. It's a completely different thing when you don't work with your own child, though. It's a completely different opportunity to, like you say, play. And I think in a way it plays and it pushes their practice in a different way, which is exciting.
And which is also play as it's not simply frivolous or time wasting, but it's like play with like an intention behind it. Yeah, generative. I just wonder if we want to...
I was just going to say play for a purpose. Yeah. I mean, because basically, I bought 30 iPads. I bought 30 iPads not for the kids, for the adults, for the teachers. And I went, right, okay, have a play with them. Because you learn through play. And that it Mick's right. I think Mick's talking about a couple of things. a lot of it is about how children and adults are less creative and creative thinkers. And in actual fact, Google aren't appointing anybody as graduates from England anymore because of the fact they can't find anybody who's creative, which is completely and utterly balmy. But unfortunately, that's the education system at the moment. But that doesn't mean to say, so we're a very creative school. I know that's really kind of weird to say that, but we use very creative concepts and wedged into the curriculum. So there's a lot of people who say, well, you can't do that anymore. But of course you can. The curriculum's there. You can be creative as you want with the curriculum. But in terms of being creative thinkers, that's something else. I mean, like universities have got something to say with that. I mean, I notice we're at an old school and we are still sat in a very old school way. And that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, you know, and exploring spaces is the next big thing. I mean, I went to no school in Australia where they moved the windows, the seats are on casters, the desks are on casters, and the space is completely movable. But again, it's money and it's things like that. But you know, it would. The really unfortunate thing is we had a fantastic curriculum that's called the Rose Review, and unfortunately the Tories came in and ripped it up. And you know, I don't know. I think, you know, we'd have been in a much different place if we'd have been all doing the some of the recommendations in the Rose Review. But yeah, anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a question for you. So in our kids exhibition, something that I noticed is that when we publicly showed the kids' artworks in our exhibition, I was amazed how much they lit up by being recognized publicly. Like, we are looking at you, we're recognizing your efforts. I was wondering if you had any kind of similar experiences with Abacus.
I mean, Abacus people we actually had a commitment to Simon and Tom Bloor that we wouldn't wipe away the drawings. So, and then we had to reach a point of compromise because within like 2 days the walls had been filled because it's just people came to find it. So people would come back to find what they'd done. People would leave work behind in the room upstairs. There was a kind of lot of pegboard around and things, like structures things could be added to. But then there's probably other examples beyond Abacus where our participation team have worked with an artist for quite a long time. So Abacus was actually quite a short kind of lead-in show, relatively, but where an artist might have collaborated with children, and yeah, their kind of sense of ownership is huge and their sense of pride is huge, but they've had a kind of longer collaborative process with someone. So a group of children worked on a temporary artwork for the front courtyard, and so that was there for 3 months, also working with Blue Room. So that kind of, just shifted a sense of ownership to the building as well. Yeah, no, hugely. And I think also I should say, Blue Coat is kind of like very well visited. It's sort of here in the city, you know, you would come here to charge your phone or go to the garden. The team here do a huge amount of outreach, so to the kind of much further out areas that don't have cultural provision. And then it's about connecting people back, which is also involves things like free buses, but also about valuing the work that's done out there and brought back. So we've got relationships kind of with neighbourhoods. And the thing that I think I probably learnt from Abacus is also sometimes things take time, and we want to do more projects that are collaborative and participatory, but I know that we have to leave maybe 3 years for them, and then it's sort of thinking about how that gets structured in.
Okay, we have a bit of time for questions. If anyone has anything they'd like to add or ask any of the speakers.
Particularly the political side of education that some of you have raised. And I'm also interested in about the agency of the child, and in terms of kind of like, you know, people who work with children, whether that's pigeonholed slightly, in terms of, I'm interested in the ratio as well, in terms of how we allow agency for children and give space and give time. I'm really curious to kind of what would happen if you just, I don't know, allowed children to just be in a gallery space, and their only one thing is that they're going to create an exhibition together, but they have total kind of authorship, ownership, to see what happens to play in there, to maybe just be facilitated gently, softly, within a space. Because I think so much of our curriculum is kind of gone the other, education's gone the other extreme. And then there's the place in between where we kind of work with children and we teach them. And then there's the other place of where we go, actually, just let them be kids, let's follow them, let's see what they do, let's see what they create. You know, you see it in playgrounds now, parents are kind of like on them, tracking them, by like little monitors, we follow them up the ladder, you know, wait till they get down. It's like, how can we really give them that foundation, that development, that building, to be able to be creative when they're older, to be able to play, to be able to think outside the box, to be creative thinkers, if we don't allow any space or time anywhere. And it happens even though we're in a creative setting here. It's like there's still, and you know, I'm an artist who works with kids, but it's still this sense of having to, you know, achieve something by the end of it, or produce something, or push, or kind of add in things. And it's like, sometimes we just need to go the other way and just go, watch, observe, listen, see what's happening.
So, I agree. One thing that we noticed, so we have a kids workshop that's reserved for kids. It's full of material. But what we did notice is if we just put kids in there, they're kind of like they're a little bit overwhelmed and they don't know what to do. So what we found through trial and error is that by giving them a tour of the exhibitions that we have on view, and then giving them materials and giving them the parameter, not telling them what to do or what to make, not like color in, square A red, square B blue, but giving them materials and saying, why don't you make your own version, make your own artwork based in some way on what you saw today, right? You don't have to copy, you don't have to, but it's just, that's kind of the parameter. And there's no right and there's no wrong, and there's no one hovering over you saying, like, you have to do it this way. That's what we found was because it was just the right amount of direction and then being left alone. And then if they need help, we'll help them with something. If they get frustrated, the educators come and help. But that took a little bit of time to figure out, and of course, every time we have a workshop, that's a negotiation that we have. But that sense of, here's your inspiration, and here's your material, and we're going to leave you alone and see what happens, has been really gratifying. Also, though, I would say, you mentioned putting kids in a room, in a gallery, and letting them make an exhibition. That's basically what we're trying to do. That is what we do. But that has to happen over time. Right? And so that happens over months. So they make an artwork, they make another artwork, they make another artwork, then they make another artwork, and then we all come together and they make a show, right? And of course there are some practical parameters, but that's basically what it is. It's like, let's all sit around together and make a show. And that's the hard lesson that I learned, was like, step back and like, let's think creatively about this and not make a show in the way that I thought a show needed to be made.
That's a good point about make another. One of the other issues I've found is the idea of iteration has gone out the window because of this kind of tick box mentality where, I've done that, I don't have to do it again to make it better. And I think what you're saying is bang on. I mean, there's nothing I'd like better to watch a load of kids in a room making mistakes. As long as they're safe, it's fine. And there's a lot of fear. I mean, I talk to my students quite bluntly about this, and a lot of the fear they have is humiliation, which I think is absolutely appalling, for the fact that their drawing's not fantastic, somebody else is going to laugh at them. And I just don't understand. If you're in an art school, this is this safe place for you to actually explore that idea of making mistakes, and they don't seem to want to make a mistake. It's like everything seems to be, that's great, it's gold now, I can tick that and go on to the next.
Right, that's what I was going to say too, like, just because you've made one great thing doesn't mean you shouldn't make another great thing, right? Like, it's not like, oh, I'm done now.
Yeah.
I think material is such a big thing, like not only art being taken out of the curriculum, but if it is still there, the materials that they are using are just so uninspiring sometimes. And it's not about money, it's not about having the best paints, but just playful material. And that's something that I've really noticed, and with a lot of these academies and schools that already are kind of pigeonholing what young people are going to do. And there's some amazing ones, it's not all fail or anything, but there's an incredible school called The Studio here who I've worked with, and Alex Brewster there, the head of art, was like, I really want you to bring an artist in and work with Marvin, because actually they can all make a website like that, and they can do this, but they don't know how to do anything with their hands. And when she said, I want you to make a prop of it was literally like to make something look like a cupboard, which was just, you know, this. They were just totally freaked out, you know. But actually, by the end, it was good, but it's just a different part of your brain. And so that idea of doing a mistake physically somehow is kind of interesting, but it's, yeah.
I was asking this question, is what if? What if this, you can do this, and what if this happens, and what if you make that 10 foot tall and bright pink? But they're so reticent to break out of that, oh, no, I daren't, and thinking, why not? You know, just what's causing these issues? I'd love to know that, really.
I mean, from an educational point of view, I mean, basically, play is traditionally thought of as just for the reception and nursery. And in actual fact, that is driven by the curriculum. And unfortunately, schools are driven by data, and we have to, because otherwise, if we don't get children, a certain percentage of children to a certain level, then we are a failing school and we can be taken over. I mean, that's where we're at. You can still be creative, and we're not massively stats driven in year 6, but we are, because we have to be, because that's what a school's judged on. I mean, you know, short of just chucking the curriculum out, like I discussed earlier, it's just really, really difficult to kind of change that mindset. And I mean, Mick's right about making mistakes, and resilience is just, you know, you ask a child to do something, and you're not saying do it again. It's kind of, you know, children find it very difficult, you know, wherever they are, to do something. You know, if you point something out, they'll think, oh my God, you know, it's I've done something wrong, and it's, you know, it's getting past, and it's just about educating. It's about educating them, giving them some resilience. And I hate the word, I really do hate the word, but that growth mindset stuff, it's very trendy at the moment, and it's really pertinent. But it's just a very, very difficult skill to teach, and you have to have done it for a number of years.
I also work at Blue Coat, and I run the participation programme, and I just wanted to make a few little, I just wanted to say that one of the programmes we do here is called Out of the Blue. Marianne mentioned it, and it's an after-school art club, so some of them are in schools, and part of the point of it is that children have ongoing access to arts, high quality arts activities in an after school way. So I just wanted to kind of say that one of the things that is lacking is long-term engagement, and also the ability to follow children into older age and see what these types of projects like Out of the Blue, what kind of impact they have on the lives of the primary school age children who engage with them through Betty's programme. I also wanted to say that we mix facilitators, artist facilitators with learning disabled artists, and their concept of normal is different, and play is different, and that adds a really special thing to it, because they come here during school holidays, and you watch interaction happening here in the gallery, and that's really I think what happens when you grow up is you kind of forget how to see things in weird ways, maybe. Not always, but especially not. But anyway, and the other thing I wanted to say was that what we experience a lot with our children from different communities in Liverpool, Liverpool's really small. It's only about 487,000 people, which for a city is really small. But nevertheless, we don't have a lot of travelling from our communities into the city centre, and we don't have a lot of people coming into institutions necessarily, children. So it's breaking down those barriers. That's why we do outreach work, and that was it. That's all I wanted to say.
So I just want to say what's interesting what you said there is about following children's journeys. And I've been asked by one of Julian's former colleagues to come into their school to show junior school age children that here's a working class bloke from Sheffield who draws pictures for a living. You know, just to say like, look, this is a job. You can. A lot of them actually don't know that is a job they can do. They think they got to work at B&Q or in a call centre. knowing that these creative industries work is actually out there. And I think this is the kind of the less privileged schools are not subjected to this kind of way of thinking. And what you're saying, you almost looked embarrassed about looking at things in an odd way, a different way. I don't think it should be. I think if you've got a quirky point of view on life, it should be embraced, you know.
We learn those lessons from Blue Room every day that we work with them, because their concept of that is different. So it's a really important part of the process for us. And actually, all the way through, I've been asked by people I've worked with, like, do you actually get paid to do that? All the time. And, you know, it is about explaining the world of work, and that you don't have to absolutely hate it and be crying and getting bladdered on Friday because you hated it.
But also, I just want to point out, this is probably... This
I
is,
still do that.
this is probably...
That's yours tonight, then?
So this is probably fairly obvious too, but we're talking a little bit about, like, you know, the idea that you can, like, draw for a living, and that's great, and I think really worthwhile. But I also just want to make a note for the record that I think creativity is important in every field, right? Like, being able to play is crucial in scientific discovery, right? It's crucial in software engineering. It's crucial in, you know, I can't think of a field that doesn't benefit from creative thinking. So yeah, I just wanted to put that on the record as well, that we're not just talking about arts as a career, we're talking about everything
And that's
as a
why
career.
it's so crazy it's being pulled off the curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, all I was going to say is that, you know, just going back to your point, I think it's all right for art to be for grown-ups. You know, we can't say that every single piece of art in a museum or a gallery has to be for everybody. But the thing that really annoys me is kind of like this example. So there's Yorkshire Sculpture Park, for example, and it is this huge, fantastic park full of these huge sculptures. Henry Moore, you know, all the famous people. And there's signs on them saying kids can't climb on them. And that really annoys me. It's a park. You know what I mean? And that's the thing.
Made of bronze, it won't wear out any time.
No, exactly. And it's like, you know, you're expecting kids to stand back and go, oh yeah, the form and the lines, well, amazing. But what they want to do is climb on the bloody thing. And that's the issue. It has to be the accessibility. If you're going to stick a sculpture in a park, you need to expect that kids are going to want to play on it, because they're just exploring.
The thing that was just occurred to me as you were saying about play, one of the important things of play is review and evaluation. So the sort of the creative thing about play, if you make a mistake or whatever, is actually reviewing and looking. It might not have been what you intended, but there might be something more out of it, and all of that is what is the creative thing, isn't it? And that's why it's good to play and test, not just. That's why it's good to fail, because of the review bit and the re-evaluation. That's what makes failing
I think testing
important.
is a good word. And, you know, if you can actually reframe it as rather than testing, then experiment if you want to get out of the kind of challenge idea of play.
But also that is the adult version of play, though, remember. If you get a 10-year-old, they're not going to start playing with Lego and going, right, I'm just going to evaluate all these bricks first, and then I'm going to use my design. It's not that, you know, that's kind of, it's the bit that we get when we get older, but children do it intrinsically, and that's the bit. Yeah.
I mean, they might not be like, you know, they might not be like, is this, they're not going to evaluate every Lego, but they might be like, why did my tower fall down?
Yeah.
You know?
And also, the other thing is sorry to interrupt, but no, it's fine. Basically, in terms of a teacher, you know, there's a saying that goes around in my head all the time when I'm in the class. Yeah, don't be the sage on the stage, be the guide on the side. And it's that element where you're not kind of adulterating children's play, you're kind of guiding them towards something that you think that they would like want to go to.
I think that's probably a really nice place to end. So thank you all for coming. And just to say that if you want to listen to anything again, you can. It is going to be archived on This Is Tomorrow's website. And the next event in the series will be happening at the Tetley on the 21st of February. Okay, thank you.